Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about transaction states in Dbms. Transaction is very important concept in Dbms. So we should know about what is transaction, what is the operations behind the transaction. So in many banking applications or mainly use transaction concepts. So transaction means execution of operations that is called transaction. The transaction in execution, the transaction should be in any one of these states. One is active state, partially committed, then committed, failed state, and aborted state. The transaction should be in any one of these states during its execution. Okay. Now let's discuss from the starting state, that is initial state. The starting state of every transaction is active state. Every transaction, that is all the transaction, will start from the active state. When it initiates its transaction, it starts from the active state. So before starting its execution, a data is stored in the local buffer. So after the active state, the transaction should goes to either failed state or partially committed state. If suppose the transaction moves from active state to partially committed state means all the operations in the transaction will be completed successfully. So completed without any delay or any inconsistencies, all the operations are successfully completed. So after this partially committed state, it moves to the committed state. If suppose there is no inconsistencies in executions, it goes to the committed state. This is the final state of transaction. So after the committed state, the data will be updated in the database permanently. So this way is called successful execution of transaction. So every successful transaction is ended with the committed state. If suppose the transaction moves from active state to failed state means because of any inconvenience or any inconsistencies or any network failure during the transaction means the transaction moves from active state to failed state. If suppose the transaction moves from active state to failed state means definitely if it goes to the aborted state because the transaction never started. So it must go to the aborted state, that is the transaction is never happened. So we can start from the same transaction from the initial state. So this is the states of transaction. This is a very important concept in transaction. So there is only two states, aborted state or committed state. Aborted state means the transaction never happened. Committed state means the transaction is completely completed successfully. These are the two states in transaction. So this is an example of transaction. So transaction begins with read operation. Then the transaction, that is the data item A is reduced with the amount of 50. Then then the next operation is write of A. After this operation, the data item is updated. That is called write of operations. Then read of B is another data item. So we are reading another data item B. Then B is updated with 50 and write of B. So we are using two data items A and B. So A is reduced with some amount and B is increased with some amount. We are updating with the write of operations. So we are updating A with the write of A and B with write of B. Here we are ending the transaction. This is the process during these transactions. If the operations are successfully completed means the transaction traveled from active, partially committed and committed. If suppose a transaction any inconsistencies occur means the transaction is never happened. So the path of the transaction is active state and failed state and aborted state. This is the concept of transaction states. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching.